That night, I heard voices in my house, voices that didn't belong there. A stranger's whisper, muffled laughter, and the sound of breathing that had no right to echo in my home. I didn't barge into the room like they do in movies. Instead, I froze, listening through the air vent. Her voice, my wife's, and his, a man I didn't know. I pressed record on my phone. Every word, every moan became a weapon I would use later. In that moment, I knew my revenge would not be loud or messy. It would be cold, calculated, and precise. For the next few days, I played the role of the loving husband. Breakfast in bed. Smiles. Soft kisses before work. She relaxed while I gathered evidence. I studied her messages, tracked her meetings, learned his name. He was married too. 2 kids. A respectable job. That made my plan even sweeter. The first strike, an anonymous package to his wife, a flash drive with videos and audio from my own bedroom. The second, a formal complaint to his company, attaching every piece of proof. 1 week later, he lost his job. His family collapsed. His reputation was gone. But I wasn't done. With my wife, I was ice cold, but I didn't leave. I waited for her world to crack. When she finally came to me in tears, begging for forgiveness, I slid an envelope across the table. Inside, a DNA test. The results read, probability of paternity, 0%. She fell to her knees, pale and trembling. At that exact moment, her lover knocked on the door. They had planned to explain everything together. I let him in, looked them both in the eyes, and said, "You destroyed my life. Now I'm destroying yours." I threw them out into the cold night. No place to go. No one to turn to. Just the weight of what they'd done and the knowledge that I had taken everything from them. That night, something woke me, not a noise loud enough to alarm a stranger, but enough to tear a husband from sleep. Muffled laughter. Breathless whispers. The sound of skin against skin. I didn't storm in. I didn't shout. I simply stood in the dark, listening through the air vent. Her voice and his. 2 people destroying my life, unaware they were being recorded. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I watched the recording over and over, letting the betrayal sink in. By dawn, the shock had turned to something colder than rage. A clarity so sharp it hurt. In the days that followed, I became someone else. The perfect husband. Breakfast served with a smile. Random kisses on the cheek. I played the role so well, she believed she was safe. Meanwhile, I learned everything: his name, his address, his wife's phone number. He had a family, children, a career built over 20 years. All of it fragile. The first move was quiet, a package to his wife, a flash drive labeled for your eyes only. The second, a complaint to his employer with every file attached. By the end of the week, his marriage was shattered. His career gone. His reputation reduced to whispers. But I waited. I wanted her to feel the ground collapsing beneath her feet. When she finally broke, sobbing, shaking, begging me to forgive her, I handed her an envelope. Inside, a DNA test. Probability of paternity, 0%. She stopped breathing for a moment. Her hands trembled so badly, the paper nearly tore. And then a knock at the door. It was him. They had planned to come clean together. I let him in. The 2 of them stood there, broken, afraid. And in the quietest voice I've ever used, I said, "You thought I'd scream. You thought I'd cry. But I don't raise my voice to the dead. And as far as I'm concerned, you're both already buried." I opened the door. They stepped into the freezing night, no plan, no future, nothing left to lose. Except the memory of me, and the way I looked at them when I ended everything. They vanished into the night, but I knew. Their fall had only begun. Days later, I saw photos on his wife's social media. She had changed her status to free. The comments were a wildfire of questions, rumors, and accusations. Every word chipped away at him. I turned my attention to her world, her friends, her relatives, her coworkers. Each of them received a link. No message, no explanation. Just the evidence. Silence always screams louder than words. He lost his friends, his support, and even the right to see his children without supervision. She lost her job when her boss discovered why she had been missing important meetings. And yet, I didn't feel finished. A month later, I had a courier deliver a small package to the address of the apartment they were now renting. Inside was that same flash drive, the one with the recording from my bedroom. No note, no name, just a reminder that I was still out there. This time, they didn't beg. They were afraid. And fear lasts longer than shame. 6 months passed. My life looked different now, new apartment, new routines, new people. I thought I'd buried them in the cold night for good. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it until I saw the message. "We need to talk. It's about her and the child." It was from him. I deleted it instantly. I wasn't going to let them pull me back in. But the next day, a letter arrived at my door. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. My wife, my ex-wife, standing on a street corner, holding a toddler. A child I'd never seen before. On the back, 2 words were written in black marker. "It's yours." My hands tightened around the picture. This wasn't possible. I'd seen the DNA test. I'd seen the 0%. Unless they'd faked the results. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow looked like someone watching. Every sound made me turn my head. I had spent months destroying them, but if this was true, maybe I'd also destroyed something innocent. And that thought was more dangerous than any revenge. I couldn't ignore it. The next morning, I hired a private investigator, someone discreet, someone who didn't ask questions. I gave him one task: find out the truth about the child. Days turned into weeks. Each night, I stared at that photograph, wondering if it was a trap or my greatest mistake. Then the call came. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it. "I have your answer. You need to see this in person." We met in a quiet diner on the edge of the city. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, surveillance photos, documents, birth records. The child wasn't his. The child wasn't mine. The father was someone else entirely, a man I'd never heard of. A man she had been seeing before either of us. It hit me then. All of it, the affair, the lies, the marriage, it had been a web she'd spun long before I even suspected a thing. And I wasn't the hunter in her story. I was just another name on her list. When I looked up from the folder, the investigator was already gone. On the table, beneath the file, was a single note in her handwriting. "You think you won, but I choose who loses." I walked out into the night, feeling the same cold air as the night I'd thrown them out. Only this time, the chill came from somewhere deeper, from knowing that revenge doesn't end when you decide it's over. Sometimes, the past lets you go. And sometimes, it doesn't. His note haunted me. I burned it the same night I read it, but the words stayed etched into my mind. I choose who loses. At first, I told myself it was just another manipulation. Another attempt to pull me back into her orbit. But then, little things began to happen. An envelope slipped under my door. Inside, a photo of me walking to work. Taken from across the street. A call in the middle of the night, no voice, just breathing. My car alarm going off at 3 a.m., but no one in sight when I ran outside. She was watching me. Or maybe it wasn't her. I started digging into her past, into that mysterious other man who turned out to be the child's real father. And what I found made my blood run cold. He wasn't just some fling. He had a record: assault, fraud, stalking. And his last known address? 2 blocks from where I live now. That night, I received one final message. No number. No name. Just 4 words. "Your turn is next." The game we started in my bedroom had moved into the streets. And this time, I wasn't sure I'd be the one writing the ending. I didn't go to the police. Not because I didn't trust them, but because this wasn't the kind of danger you solve with paperwork. This was personal, and it had roots deep enough to pull me under if I wasn't careful. I started carrying a small recorder in my pocket, my phone always set to camera mode. I switched my route to work every day, never taking the same street twice. But no matter what I did, I could feel eyes on me. One night, I decided to turn the tables. I left my apartment at midnight, walking toward the old train yard on the edge of the city. If someone was following me, that was where I'd see them. And I did. A shadow peeled away from the darkness between two freight cars. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with deliberate slowness. I kept walking, my heartbeat hammering in my ears, until he was close enough for me to see his face under the flickering yard light. It was him, the other man, the real father. And he was smiling. "She told me about you," he said. "Said you like to play games." He stepped closer, and I saw something glint in his hand. Not a gun. A key. "This opens the locker at Central Station," he whispered. "Inside is everything you need to know. About her. About me. About why you were never supposed to find out." He pressed the key into my hand, then stepped back into the shadows. By the time I called out, he was gone. Now I had a choice. Walk away or open that locker and finally learn the truth. Central Station was a place you could disappear in. Hundreds of faces rushing past, none of them looking twice at a man with a small brass key in his pocket. I waited until just after midnight, when the station was almost empty, before I approached the row of old, metal lockers near the far wall. The number on the key was faded, but I found it 117. My hand hesitated on the lock. Once I opened this, there would be no going back. The key turned with a heavy click. Inside was a plain black duffel bag. I pulled it out, set it on the floor, and unzipped it. The smell hit me first, old paper and something metallic, almost like blood. Inside were a stack of photographs, grainy, taken at a distance. All of me. Walking to work. Sleeping in my apartment. Eating dinner alone. A small leather notebook filled with names, dates, and cryptic notes. My name appeared more than once, underlined in red. And at the bottom, a VHS tape with a single word written on the label, before. Before what? My phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message from a blocked number. "Don't play it at home." I zipped the bag shut, feeling the weight of it, not just in my hands, but in my chest. Whatever was on that tape wasn't just about her. It was about me. And I wasn't sure I was ready to know. I didn't go home. Instead, I rented a small, anonymous room above a 24-hour laundromat. The kind of place where no one asked for ID if you paid in cash. There was an old TV with a built-in VHS player in the corner. I locked the door, closed the curtains, and slid the tape in. At first, just static. Then, a date appeared in the corner of the screen. 2 years before I met her. The footage was grainy, shot from a hidden camera. It showed a restaurant. A booth in the back. And me, sitting there, laughing. Across from a woman. It wasn't my wife. I didn't even recognize her. I leaned closer. The conversation had no sound, just the distorted hum of the recording. But then, the woman slid a manila envelope across the table toward me. I opened it. My expression changed surprise, then a slow smile. I shook her hand. The tape jumped forward. Same woman, same booth, but this time my wife, younger, dressed differently, walked in and sat beside her. They talked. Papers were exchanged. My face never appeared again. And then the final scene. The woman handed my wife a set of house keys. My house keys. The screen went black. I sat there, frozen, my heart pounding. The message was clear. She hadn't just met me. She had been sent to me. And whoever had arranged it was still out there. I didn't sleep that night. The more I replayed the images in my mind, the clearer it became. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a setup. A long game. I called the investigator. Told him to drop everything else and dig into the woman from the tape. By noon, he called back. Her name's Lydia Cross. Former corporate fixer, the kind companies hire to quietly ruin people. Lawsuits, bankruptcies, smear campaigns, she was the best. Until she vanished 5 years ago. And the connection to me? I asked. He hesitated. She worked for someone you used to work with. A partner. The one you forced out. My chest tightened. I knew exactly who he meant. Richard Hale. My old business partner. I'd exposed him for stealing from our investors. He'd lost everything, his fortune, his name, his standing. Apparently, he'd been busy getting it back. That night, a letter appeared under my door. Heavy paper. Elegant handwriting. I built your wife. I gave her your keys. I made her love you. And I made her destroy you. You took my life. Now I'm taking yours, one piece at a time. At the bottom, a final line. See you soon. For the first time since this all began, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about survival. I knew one thing. Richard didn't make threats for the sake of scaring people. If he said see you soon, he was already close. I needed to move first. The investigator dug deeper into his recent activities, offshore accounts, false identities, shell companies. Richard had rebuilt himself in the shadows, and now he was untouchable on paper. But shadows have patterns. I started mapping them, locations he'd been spotted, names he'd used, companies he'd opened and closed. All threads leading back to one place, a luxury condo downtown, registered to a fake name, but with security cameras showing him walking in and out. I didn't go to the front door. Instead, I found the service entrance, the one used by cleaning crews and delivery men. I wore a cap, kept my head down, and slipped inside with a group of maintenance workers. The elevator opened on the 32nd floor. His floor. The hallway smelled faintly of expensive cologne. I reached his door, 3209, and slid a small envelope under it. Inside was a single Polaroid, a photo of him, taken through the crosshairs of a rifle scope. I didn't own a rifle, but he didn't need to know that. 5 minutes later, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. You think you can play my game? Then you'd better be ready to lose faster than you ever imagined. He hung up. And that's when I realized I hadn't been the one hunting him. I'd just stepped exactly where he wanted me to. The message from Richard wasn't just a threat, it was an invitation. And like a fool, I took it. 2 nights later, I received a plain white envelope taped to my apartment door. Inside was a single key and an address written in block letters. Pier 47, Storage Unit 12B. The docks at night were a graveyard of rusted cranes and shadows that moved with the tide. I parked 2 streets away and walked the rest of the distance, every step echoing on the wet concrete. The unit door was padlocked. My key fit perfectly. Inside, the air was stale. A single overhead bulb flickered, casting long, sharp shadows. In the center of the room was a wooden chair. On it, a VHS player and an old TV, both plugged into a generator humming in the corner. A note was taped to the screen. Press play. I didn't want to, but I did. The screen lit up. Grainy footage again. This time, it wasn't a restaurant or a hidden meeting. It was me, sleeping in my apartment, last night. The camera angle was from inside my bedroom. My blood went cold. Then the screen cut to black, and Richard's voice came through the speakers, smooth and calm. I've been closer than you think. And tonight, you won't be going home. Behind me, the unit door slammed shut. The lock clicked. I spun toward the sound, but the storage unit was dark beyond the flickering bulb. Footsteps echoed slowly, deliberately, as if the man walking toward me already knew I had nowhere to go. Richard stepped into the light. Older than I remembered, but sharper, his eyes calculating, his suit immaculate despite the damp, salty air. He looked like a man who'd been living well while destroying others. You've aged, he said with a smirk. But then again, so have I. Difference is, I've been planning for this day. You've been stumbling toward it. I clenched my fists. Why me? You had a dozen enemies. He tilted his head. Because you didn't just take my money. You humiliated me. You made me small in a world where I was everything. And humiliation is the one debt I always collect. He stepped closer, and I noticed something glinting in his hand, not a gun, but a small USB drive. On this, he said, is everything that will erase you from your own life. Bank accounts, messages, police reports, all carefully crafted. When I'm done, you'll be a ghost no one believes existed. I forced a smile. You really think you can erase me? His smile widened. I already started. From outside the unit, I heard the faint sound of sirens approaching. Not random, planned. They're not here for me, Richard whispered. They're here for you. The sirens grew louder, bouncing off the metal walls of the dockyard. My pulse quickened. If Richard had set this up right, by the time the police arrived, I'd look like the man they were after. I glanced toward the locked door. No way out without breaking it, and that would only make me look guilty. Richard leaned casually against the wall, twirling the USB drive between his fingers. You've got about 90 seconds before they're here. You can explain everything, of course, but I doubt they'll listen once they find what I left in your car. I didn't wait to find out what he meant. The unit had no windows, but in the corner, the generator hummed beside a ventilation grate. Old screws. Rusted edges. While he talked, I slipped my hand into my pocket and pulled out the multi-tool I'd carried for months. The grate came loose with a painful screech. Richard straightened, realizing too late what I was doing. I dove into the narrow crawl space just as the first red and blue lights flashed through the cracks in the door. Behind me, Richard's voice echoed. Run, if you want. I'll still find you. The vent opened onto the rear of the dockyard, where the shadows were thick and the sirens muffled. I kept running, my breath sharp in the cold night, knowing that for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about survival. And that meant disappearing before Richard could take the next move. I didn't go home. I didn't even go to the apartment I kept under a fake name. Richard had shown me just how close he could get, which meant every place I'd ever been was compromised. I took cash from an emergency stash hidden in an old locker at a gym I hadn't visited in years. From there, I bought a cheap second-hand phone, no contract, paid in cash. No GPS. No trace. For 2 weeks, I vanished. Slept in hostels under false names, moved every night, stayed invisible. But while I hid, I was working. I still had contacts from my old life, people who owed me favors, people who hated Richard as much as I did. Quietly, I started piecing together his new empire: offshore accounts, front companies, fake charities. The same tactics he used to ruin others were the same ones that could bring him down. I wasn't going to just expose him. I was going to take his power apart, one piece at a time. The first move was small, a whisper to an old journalist friend about irregularities in one of his foundations. The second, a transfer of a single incriminating document to a hacker who knew how to make it look like it came from inside his own office. Within a month, the first cracks appeared. And if I played this right, Richard wouldn't even know it was me until it was far too late. Because now, I wasn't the hunted. I was the ghost he could never catch. Richard's empire wasn't built on money alone. It ran on loyalty, or more precisely, on fear. His inner circle consisted of men and women who owed him everything and knew too much to ever leave. But I also knew one thing about people like that: they were loyal until they weren't. I started with Victor, Richard's financial strategist. He'd been with him for over a decade, but I knew his weakness: gambling. Big, illegal games run by men who didn't forgive debts. A quiet tip to the right people and Victor's unpaid balance suddenly doubled. When he called Richard for help, I made sure Richard's phone was already blowing up with another crisis: the fake charity scandal I'd set in motion weeks earlier. Richard told him, "Handle it yourself." Victor didn't forget. Next was Amanda, his PR chief. She was clean on paper, but I dug into her past and found a story she never wanted told, one involving an accidental death in her college years that had been covered up by a very expensive lawyer. I didn't threaten her. I simply left a copy of the old police report on her desk with a single note. Ask yourself if Richard would protect you now. The cracks widened. They didn't quit outright, that would draw suspicion. But their loyalty was gone, replaced with quiet resentment. And that's when I struck the real blow. A forged internal memo leaked to the media suggested Richard was preparing to cut several top executives loose to save himself. It wasn't true, at least not yet, but paranoia spread faster than truth. By the time Richard realized what was happening, his own people were whispering behind closed doors, covering their tracks, and quietly planning exits. He was bleeding power from the inside. And he still didn't know whose hand was holding the knife. It was inevitable. Richard had too many enemies to guess the right one immediately, but he wasn't stupid. Sooner or later, he would feel my fingerprints on the chaos. The first sign came as a whisper from a mutual contact, a fixer who'd once cleaned up messes for both of us. He called me from a blocked number, his voice low. "Your name's back in the air, my friend." He's looking. That meant the game was changing. I was no longer just dismantling him. I was being hunted. Richard began tightening his circle, bringing in private investigators, ex-military operatives, the kind of men who could vanish you without a trace. My safe houses became traps. Every place I thought about going, I forced myself to burn and walk away. But there was one thing Richard didn't know. I wanted him to chase me. Because the best way to control the hunt is to lead the hunter exactly where you want him. I planted breadcrumbs, sightings of me, in places I'd never set foot in, forged emails that hinted at my involvement in unrelated scandals, phone calls intercepted by people I knew he had bugging the lines. Each step pulled him deeper into a pattern I'd designed. And the final breadcrumb? An anonymous tip that the man destroying his empire was meeting a source in an abandoned warehouse on the east side, a place with no cameras, no police presence, and only one exit. It was bait. And Richard would come. With everything he had. What he didn't realize was that the warehouse was already wired, not to kill him, but to record everything he said and did. And if he made the mistake I was counting on, the world would finally see the man behind the mask. The rain came early that night, heavy and relentless, turning the warehouse's rusted roof into a drumbeat that masked every sound inside. I arrived hours before Richard, slipping through a hidden service door I'd welded shut from the outside days earlier. The place was staged perfectly. A single metal chair under a dangling bulb. Dust disturbed in just the right places to make it look like a meeting spot. And in the shadows, my cameras. Small, silent, streaming live to a private server. At 11:46 p.m., headlights cut through the cracks in the wall. 2 black SUVs. I counted at least 6 of his men stepping out, scanning the perimeter, rifles under their coats. Richard entered last. Tailored coat, leather gloves, the calm of a man who thought he was in control. But his eyes, they were sharp, hunting, and more dangerous than the guns. He stepped into the circle of light and spoke without looking around. "You've been busy, whoever you are. But tonight, it ends." I stayed in the shadows, letting my voice echo through the hollow space. "It ends, yes, but not for me." The men fanned out, searching. One of them brushed past a pillar, triggering a small click. A light in the corner flickered on a projector. And then it began. The footage I'd been collecting for weeks, Richard bribing officials, threatening partners, even a few clips of him with my wife, flashed on the wall behind him, massive, undeniable. He spun, eyes widening for just a fraction of a second before his mask returned. "You think this will stick? I own the people who decide what sticks." But here was the beauty, it wasn't just recording. It was live. Broadcast. Unstoppable. Somewhere out there, journalists, rivals, and former allies were watching the Empire King reveal his true face. Richard's calm finally cracked. He barked an order to his men. "Find him. Now." But the only exit they hadn't blocked was the one I'd already disappeared through. By dawn, the city was already whispering. Clips from the warehouse streamed across every news site, every social feed. Richard's name was no longer a symbol of power, it was trending alongside words like corruption, blackmail, and affair. His calls to allies went unanswered. Contracts dissolved overnight. The same men who once toasted him in glass towers were now deleting his number. But I wasn't finished. This wasn't about just breaking him, it was about erasing his ability to rebuild. 2 days later, I visited the one place I knew he'd be. A private club on the edge of the financial district, the kind of place where ruined men go to drink and pretend they still matter. He sat alone in the corner, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight. When he saw me, he didn't stand, didn't shout. Just stared, like a man who finally realized the fight was already lost. I sat across from him. "You should know," I said quietly, "the tip about your offshore accounts goes public tomorrow." He exhaled, a slow, defeated sound. "What do you want? Money? An apology?" I leaned forward. "I want you to remember what it feels like to lose everything. And I want you to live with it. No threats. No violence. Just the weight of knowing his empire was gone, and I was the one who took it from him. As I stood to leave, he whispered, almost pleading, "You could have just walked away." I looked back once. So could you, that night in my house. And then I left him there, in the dim light, surrounded by the ghosts of his own making. The hunt was over.